Hey folks, it's Jason Heath here with a little more Bass Blog TV. Just got a few stories we want to share with you here this week over from doublebassblog.org and other places as well. Just some things that I'm finding interesting. So, a couple of things that have been happening this week. One, this is just a little shameless plug, but I hope that folks enjoy this, is I put out the second part of my series, Success in the Private Lesson Studio, Part 2, which is just talking about advantages and disadvantages of teaching at a music school, whether it's a university or a music academy or even like a music store in the back or something like that, versus being totally private. So we've got some of the pros and cons over here, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes for this video here. So you can check that out. Got all sorts of pros and cons. These are just my own personal perspectives, but hopefully you'll find that interesting. Now, the new Bass Musician magazine just launched, and this is a bi-monthly publication. I write a column called Contrabass Conversations, ho-ho, original name, where I basically just repackage one of my episodes from Contrabass Conversations. So I actually put out the 100th episode for this issue, which we actually did back in the fall, but it's fun to look at this list and just sort of see all the names that you'd recognize from the bass community that we've had on this list. And even since this came out, we've had several people that are very prominent players and will continue to. So this is a growing project. But Andy Anderson from the Lyric Opera, Philip Cerna, who's an early music specialist, John Grillo, formerly of the New World Symphony, who co-hosts the show with me many times, Bjorn Burkhout, a composer, Kate Nettleman, principal bass of the Hong Kong Philharmonic. Now she's in the Minnesota Orchestra. Weldon Anderson played on Broadway. Ira Gold's in the National Symphony. Francois Robath is soloist. He's Francois, of course. Greg Sarche from the Lyric Opera of Chicago. Lawrence Hurst from Indiana University. Eric Hochberg is a jazz bassist based in Chicago. You can see a lot of these early names are Chicago related. We've got Michael Hovnanian and Rob Kassinger from the Chicago Symphony. Jeff Turner, principal bass of the Pittsburgh Symphony. Renan Meyer, eclectic bassist, member of Time for Three. Guy Tournay, a very popular guest we've had on a couple of times, and we've featured many videos of him as well. Pete Tambroni, teacher, author, great bass player, great guy. Colin Corner, formerly of the Minnesota Orchestra. Brad Opland, also Chicago Symphony bassist. Scott Rosenthal, theater, Broadway musician. Donovan Stokes, a soloist and a bass professor as well. Virginia Dixon, famous for developing the Suzuki bass. Peter Seymour, member of Project, very cool group, also in the New World Symphony. Steve Reinfrank, a luthier and a teacher, who brought Gary Carr to Chicago many years ago, a very cool event. Owen Lee, principal bass of the Cincinnati Symphony. Steve Rodby, Pat Metheny's bassist. Lynn Seaton, prominent jazz bassist, University of North Texas jazz bass professor. Anthony Stoops, he's a soloist and professor, member of the Bad Boys of Bass. Barry Kolstein. Chris Thelkrod Weigand, two luthiers, prominent luthiers. Kolstein's shop's been around for forever. Chris is making really innovative new instruments. Dave Anderson, fantastic composer for the bass, and principal bass of the Louisiana Philharmonic. Kristen Korb, jazz vocalist, outstanding jazz bassist. Barry Lieberman, University of Washington and former LA Philharmonic principal. And the list goes on and on. We have even more people. Jeff Bradisich we just had on. We just interviewed Dan Kreckler, the most recent member of the Metropolitan Opera. Jeremy McCoy, who's the assistant principal of the Met. You can see it's an enormous list. So anyway, I'm sort of proud of doing this. I'm glad to see that it has proved to be very popular. So anyway, just wanted to highlight that. And Bass Musician magazine is a very cool publication. There are all sorts of interesting articles in this. Some of the ones that I think are particularly interesting this issue are The Working Bassist by John Carey, and then a transcription of Jaco Pastorius' solo on Used to Be a Cha-Cha, and melodic exercise for intonation and technique. So those are pretty interesting. Another guest we have coming up here on the podcast is Max Dimmoff, who we're going to be interviewing next week. Max is the principal bass of the Cleveland Orchestra. And this interview coming up, maybe just do some poking around. I always do a little research on people that we have on the show. I know that Max went to Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, which is where I went to school too. And poking around, I remember that there was a blog post that Michael Hovnanian from the Chicago Symphony wrote about Max Dimmoff's wonderful warm-ups. He has this fantastic packet of warm-ups, and we'll probably talk about this on the program. But Michael he does these great posts where he gets really geeky into fingering and that sort of thing. So I was looking through this post of one of the Simandl Gradus ad Parnassum etudes, and it's got all these interesting fingering contortions, and Michael goes into that. He talks about Max. It's very cool. If you haven't checked out Michael Hovnanian's blog, it is known as Bass Blog by Michael Hovnanian, and it is at, I believe it's csobasblog.blogspot.com. Now, we also put out a video of Miroslav Gajdos playing his own composition called Elegy, and this comes from a video that was shot actually 13 years ago. Greg Sarche of the Lyric Opera of Chicago and a Contrabass Conversations guest, he's contributed tons of links and videos over the blog ever since I started it. He's really been there since the beginning. We had a very fun interview with Greg. And Greg also teaches at Northeastern Illinois here in Chicago and at Roosevelt University in Chicago. Well, Greg brought Gajdos to the States in 1996, as well as more recently, just a couple of years ago. And this is a video that just got put out on YouTube of Gajdos playing his composition Elegy for violin and bass. And let's just have a listen for a minute or two. It's very cool. And you can check out the complete thing over at doublebassblog.org. Man, that's fantastic. I don't want to stop that. I don't want this video to go on too long. So go check that out over on the blog. And boy, in addition to being a great bassist and obviously a talented composer, Gajdos is also a singer. I don't know if you knew that, but when I got a chance to see him perform, I think it was in fall of 2005 here in Chicago. He also sang several numbers. It's very neat. And we have a video in the archives. I'll try to dig this up of Gajdos singing Per questa bella mano and playing. Very cool. Okay, we're just going to finish up today with another couple minutes of a video of someone that was a huge hit at the last International Society of Bassists convention. And if you haven't seen him play, wow. Renaud Garcia Fons. And I am hoping that we will be able to also interview him coming up here in the future. It's always harder with international guests. Just there are a lot more complications doing these interviews than they might seem when you hear them. But it can be tough to get guests. It can be tough to schedule things, especially with people that are touring. But wow, what a player! And I hope you enjoy a couple minutes here of Baron Bass.